Welcome back, everyone, to the Burnout Club. This is a place where we explore burnout and success one expert and experiment at a time. I'm your host, Patrice Bonfiglio, and today I'm joined by the fantastic Danny Goldberg. He is known for helping companies beat burnout, disengagement, turnover, all those things that we hate. So I'm so excited to talk to you, Danny. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes. The other thing I love about your history is that you started building a company at 14, and probably the listeners are more like me. I was sitting in a mall food court at 14 doing people watching, not building an empire. So I would love to hear the background about how you began this whole journey of creating a company that really works.
Yeah, for sure. Well, my entrepreneurial journey definitely starts at 14, and it started really, I have to take you back to quite a long time before. So my dad worked for a large public company, 25 plus years. He was an industrial designer. He designed tables, lockers, chairs. Thought I had an image in here someplace, but yeah. So he designed tables, lockers, chairs. I mean, beautiful stuff. And back then, when he was started his career as an industrial designer, you had to sketch everything out by hand. I mean, it was really art at that point. And he started his own design agency early on, and things were going well. And when my oldest sister was born, his largest client at the time gave him an ultimatum, basically. They said, join us full time or lose the contract. So with a family to feed, he made the practical choice. He put his business to the side. He joined this company 25 plus years, and he gave his everything to this company. He spent countless years overseas, opening up factories for them, designing thousands of products, generated hundreds of millions in revenue. And despite all that, and despite having loved what he did in his career, there was always a through line that bled through his work into my world as a kid, which was he always felt some level of underappreciated, undervalued. Despite loving what he did, there was always, and it was interesting, but he'd always kind of like, he'd come home late at night and he'd complain to me, the young kid, let me show you these things I'm doing and let me show you why this stinks. That's kind of like, and it really became like a through line for us. And it was those moments, and one moment in particular, which really shaped my worldview from a young age. And he really pushed me to say, if you have a dream, if you have a thing you want to do it, because the alternative in his situation wasn't what he once dreamed of. It was really with like his belief and his care for me that he said, like, do it. And we were sitting in the backyard one day, and I turned to him and I said, I want to be like you, a designer. And I was 14, and I said, how do I build something great? He said, find the thing you love and you'll build something amazing. And at that time, I loved boxing. I was trained for my first amateur fight. So for me, the answer was obvious. It was let's sell boxing gloves. And my dad thought for a minute, and he said, let's do it. And like, it wasn't really like much of a blink of an eye. It was like, yeah, let's do it. And when I look back at that, I'm recently a dad. My daughter is 7 months now.
Nice.
And I think,
Congrats.
Thank you. And I think, it's like, I think back to that moment in time, because it's like, it's really as a parent, I suppose, it was the defining moment that shaped what my career and my pursuits would become. And in that moment, my dad's beliefs in me sparked something that said, not only don't know if this is possible, but I don't know what's possible, and I'm going to pursue this thing and see what I can make happen. And that's exactly what I did. And, he said, let's do it. So I drafted a logo. At the time, it was a phoenix. I drafted this thing on the back of a napkin. I drafted a business plan on a yellow notepad. And my dad, he was already in and traveling overseas a lot, so he knew how to find a factory fairly easily. And
Nice.
took the money, the little nest egg I built up at 14, working at this gym, literally like cleaning the windows, the mirrors, the toilets. It wasn't a glorious job. It wasn't teaching kids how to kickbox. And I gave him that money, and I said, let's place an order. 3 months later, I'll never forget, it was a disgusting rainy day in New York City. And I was waiting for we ordered like 100 boxing gloves, nothing too crazy. And I was waiting for it to show up, and the truck was delayed because of the weather. And finally the truck pulled up and started unloading, and we filled my garage with 100 pairs of boxing gloves, and I was off to the races. And it took a while until I like actually started selling. But my weekends were replaced with like sports and activities with telling my because I couldn't drive yet, telling my parents, hey, let's go stuff the car with as much stuff, and can you drive me to this gym and that gym and that gym and this gym? And
Hmm.
that was kind of like how we started to build the business.
Yeah, that's fascinating to have a business start really with someone so young. So I bet for you, you're just trying to do what makes sense, not necessarily model the business off of other companies. Did you find that you had a sort of different lens than other companies when you were building it and scaling it?
Yeah, so for that business, and it's so long ago now, it's like almost 16 years. I built it from 2009 till 2015, and then I sold it to my largest customer. The way that I'd best describe it is like it was a sandbox, and it was my dad never was like, you have to do this or you need to do this. It was always experiment. He's like, I don't know what's going to
Hmm.
work. Let's just throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. And if it works, let's do more of it. And if it doesn't work, let's pivot. And the business
Hmm.
ended up, so I ended up selling thousands of equipment, boxing gloves. I became a distributor for a lot of these time manufacturers. So the business evolved, it grew, and I ended up spinning out of that company. I became the co-founder of another business called Diamond MMA, where we developed the world's most protective athletic cup. I mean, it was
Ah,
that business took off way
nice.
faster, way bigger market. I mean, it was used by like 90% of the guys in the UFC, Joe Rogan, and more. And
Oh.
the way the
Hmm.
business actually took off, a fighter during a live UFC event got hit square in the groin. And Joe Rogan gave us like a full blown commercial during a live event saying, hey, every fighter should be required to wear a diamond jock. And our website
Hmm.
crashed. That was the beginning of the business. I sold my business, built that business for a little bit, and then I ended
Hmm.
up leaving. And there was a little bit of an in between where I had a job for a couple months, 7 months. I ended up getting let go. And we could talk about that if it might be interesting for the sake of this podcast. But I ended
Yep.
up in the process of getting let go. A lot of people started coming to me saying, "Hey, can you help me find a factory to make this product for me overseas?" And I realized that
Yeah.
at the time there was a really good opportunity to do that. And that
Hmm.
ended up becoming my biggest business over the years. We did maybe close to 30 million in manufacturing volume. So we did a
Yeah.
high volume of manufacturing work
Really.
with brands Peloton, Traeger, Birchbox, Gravity. And
Hmm.
that business I opened up, it was based in Hong Kong. So I was the only one in New York for some time. And it was really interesting.
Hmm.
I was in my early 20s leading a remote multi-generational global team, and how I
Yeah.
thought about culture and building a team. That's probably where I took a lot of the things that I learned from my dad, from my own experience, and was very
Hmm.
intentional about how I thought about building a team.
I guess contrast that with what you help companies figure out now and what you speak about. Was the culture that you were creating in that company the same culture that you're trying to help organizations cultivate now?
Yes, and taking things that I've learned as a result after as well. So, I'd say like two things come to mind. I was hyper intentional about how I thought about building a team and culture. So, as I mentioned,
Yeah.
I was 20 years old. I opened up this office literally across the globe with
Hmm.
people who English was their second language. I was the youngest one, so team members who I was hiring were looking at me saying, "Why should we listen?" I thought people were thinking, maybe why should we listen to this guy? What's it going to be? And I didn't spend a lot of time overseas. When I go there, it was in very small periods of time, 2 weeks at a time, 3 weeks at a time, 10 days at a time. So whenever I go overseas, it was how do I be hyper intentional about making the most of our limited time together? And how do I really
Hmm.
take this pocket of time to deeply understand my people, and not just as it relates to their role in my organization, but also as it relates to like who they are. How do I deeply understand them? And it was something that
Yeah.
I think for me, it was a necessity to create a great team. It was I only have so much time with
Mm.
my people, and I need to make the
Yeah.
most of it, and I need to really understand. And it became clear to me very quickly that the better I understood them, the more deeply I understood them in those pockets
Hmm.
of time, the more
Yeah.
committed they'd be Monday when I left and I went back home to New York. So
Mm.
that was something that I grasped onto. I recognized pretty quickly. Yeah, it's a fascinating thing when you think about building a team, and remote
Yeah.
has become like such a norm now, but at the time it wasn't.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I really feel like in the moment I was forced to think very strategically about how do we build a great team.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always interesting looking back on the people that were doing it before COVID. You definitely had the stories and kind of like nuggets of knowledge. So you created this, is it culture of care? Is that the terminology that you use now?
Build with care is more like the framework, but build with
Okay.
care framework. So it's built on three pillars: safety, understanding, and connection.
Hmm. Okay. Can you walk us through what that would mean either for the leadership team or for the employees?
From building my own businesses and from taking time to study, research what makes great teams great and how some of the most effective teams are building incredible culture, what I found is that it's these three things that really shape company culture. And
Hmm.
that's safety, understanding, and connection. And
Mm.
to walk through from a 30,000 foot view, safety, without a doubt, is by far the most important thing when it comes to company culture. If you want people to
Mhm.
show up, do their best work, be committed, they need safety. And what
Yeah.
I mean by safety is people want to know that they're in a safe environment where they're safe to speak up, where they're safe to challenge the status quo, where they're safe to share new ideas, where they're safe to make
Hmm.
mistakes. Without safety, nothing else matters. If we don't have it in our organization, within our team, like truly nothing else matters. People will leave, people won't innovate,
Yeah.
people will not share new ideas. It is by far the most important thing. Google actually did like a multi-year study. It's the number one factor for building incredible teams. And what they found, no matter the team size, no matter the industry, psychological safety, and that's essentially what
Hmm.
we're talking about here, it is by far the largest and most important significant driver of great company culture.
Hmm.
So that's the first pillar. The second one is understanding, and it's a little bit about what I shared through building my own team, but understanding our people is really one of the most misunderstood things in the workplace. And I experienced it
Hmm.
from working from my first job when I went to go work for a company, and in building teams and working with different teams. I think professionally, we think we understand our people because we know everyone by name, a few nice things about one another. We, on
Yeah.
Monday morning, we check in and we say, hey, how was the weekend? Did you do anything fun? And we think that because of that, it means that we understand one another. But true understanding in the workplace, it's not about the surface. It's not about building
Hmm.
breadth. It's really about building depth, similar to what I shared, what I did with my team. And what I share is we need to dig deeper and really try to deeply understand one another, what's important to one another, what we're striving
Hmm.
for, what our goals are. It's amazing. What's fascinating to me when you look at people who have jobs and they accept these positions and we're asking them a million questions before we hire them. And then they accept the position. And so often we never, like a leader, we never sit down and we say, so what is this job like to you? How does it fit in your whole life? What are you striving for in 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now? Because as a leader and even as an organization, if we can understand how the role fits into that person's life, we can actually support them in making the
Hmm.
job fit into something bigger than just a job. And then the
Oh, yeah.
final thing that I share is this idea of constant connection. And, what I found in studying some of the most effective teams is that connection for a lot of teams isn't a constant. It's either something like a one-on-one, which becomes routine, and it's more like
Hmm.
we're checking a box. It's not something that is actually something inherently that we're trying to do for the sake of doing, or we do
Hmm.
when a big moment forces it. So think a promotion,
Yeah.
a crisis, a resignation. That's
Hmm.
when we take the time. We say, "Hey, can we help you now?" But if you're doing it only then, you're already like you've missed the boat. And connection isn't about doing it here and there. It's about making it a habit. It's about doing it constantly because
Hmm.
people constantly change. And with those
Sure.
changes, our relationship with work is constantly changing. And for me, I found that there's really like three big things that shape our relationship with work. And it's seasons of
Hmm.
life when we're, you
Hmm.
know, we're constantly changing as we get older. Big life events. So think of a divorce, a breakup, a loss, child being born, all these things shape how we show
Yeah.
up to work and perhaps work change. Companies experiencing rapid growth,
Yeah.
declines, struggling, all those things will impact how people show up to work. So those are the three things that I
Hmm.
talk about from the stage and that I talk about in my work on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. That makes so much sense because I feel like the employee sometimes is only looked at from the work product standpoint and their job, but you're bringing your whole life and whatever is going on around you to work every single day. So if there's a season of life change or an event, that's going to impact what you're thinking about when you're multitasking and how you're doing. So I think it's wise to take a step back and connect with people. What what do you think is the best first step? Let's say someone's listening and they're like, this sounds like a great idea. When they go back to work on, let's say, Monday, what should they try first?
Like, I know safety is the most important thing. Without it, nothing else
Yeah.
matters. So
Hmm.
if you don't have a safe environment where your people truly feel safe to show up to work,
Hmm.
forget understanding, forget connection. Like, it won't even matter. And
Yeah.
people will disengage. They will leave. They're going to burn out.
Yeah.
They'll stop showing up. It is by far the most important thing. And
Hmm.
with safety specifically, I'd say there's a couple things to think about.
Hmm.
One, so often we think safety is about company policy or HR. They're going to take care of making this a safe environment. But
Hmm.
safety is 100% about personal responsibility. It's about what every single person in an organization does. It's how we respond when our team members make a mistake. It's whether or not people feel they can speak up and share a new
Yep.
idea or challenge the status quo. And, you know, I'd say specifically through my work, sometimes people will say, I can't control making a safe environment. I'm not a manager. I'm not a leader. But what I say is, again, safety is 100% personal responsibility, but
Hmm.
it's about what each of us are willing to tolerate. And what I mean by that, and, I heard someone else tell me this once, and I think is a great point. You may not be the leader or the manager, but the second you see something that is unacceptable in your workplace and you tolerate it, you've accepted an
Mm.
unsafe environment. So,
Yeah.
it's about what each one of us is willing to tolerate. And if we see something that isn't acceptable, we have to be willing to speak up and talk about that
Mhm.
thing, to address it, to start to create and cultivate a more safe environment.
So with psychological safety, and I 100% agree with you. I think you need it really from the top down, right? Board level, management team, it just employees. Um, that's the only way you're going to get curiosity and innovation going. And that's the first phase, like you're saying. Is that the hardest part, or is the hardest part of changing the culture after you've established the psychological safety?
I think safety is the hardest thing because, like,
Mm.
again, without it, we
Yeah.
can need to have a discussion around anything else. And here's also why I think it's the most important thing, because it doesn't take, it's not like we need many moments to create an unsafe environment. It takes one moment, one experience that will
Mm.
completely change how someone shows up to work.
Mhm.
And I give you this as an example. I remember early on, there was a company that I did some work with, nearly, maybe let's call it 16 months, did some consulting with them. And
Mhm.
every single day, I kid you not, someone would leave crying. And
Oh
the
no,
owner,
my
he was
goodness.
a yeller. He was a yeller. It's like
Yeah.
how he handled,
Hmm.
and he was stressed. The business had raised a lot of money. He's trying to get this thing working. It's not
Hmm.
at the pace he needs. He has investors. It's stressful. I understand that. But I
Yeah.
can guarantee that in that room, people, because the first time they experienced that, they said, cool, tomorrow I'm not going to share some idea. Tomorrow
Yeah.
I'm probably not going to speak up and challenge that idea. And it's in those
Hmm.
conversations where organizations actually experience growth.
Yeah. You're losing all of that insight and the collaboration, and even you really leave yourself open to liability too, because if someone doesn't feel safe enough to give a suggestion or an idea, they're not going to feel safe to tell you about a mistake early on. They're going to try to, fix it in the sidelines, right? So to
Yeah,
avoid any sort of reaction. Huh.
100%.
So,
Yeah, and it's a moment. Like, and I'm sure
mm,
you could think of your own moments in your own career, but like, it's not, I think in the workplace specifically, I want to say there's perhaps less grace when we see things we don't like. And
mm,
it doesn't have to
yeah,
become a repetitive process. And I use another organization that I worked with, my first job, like one-on-ones, they were treated as like this moment of, hey, I want to get to know you. But it wasn't really,
mhm,
and it was like, and even if it didn't really come from an authentic place, it felt like it came from
yeah.
an authentic place. And it shaped my own experience there. And it made me feel very quickly, I said, okay, this isn't a check-in on Danny. This is a check-in on what I'm doing to move this company forward or not.
Mm, that's a great way to look at it. So every manager, your next one-on-one, ask yourself that question. Am I checking in on the human or just the piece of
Yeah,
the puzzle?
and
Yeah.
break the cadence. Like, don't just do a one-on-one in the office every single week. And that's fine if you want to stick to
Hmm.
that, but like go for a
Yeah.
coffee, grab a lunch, do something that's
Hmm.
out of the ordinary of making this thing. Hey, you're going to fill out this form. We're going to have this check-in, and then we're going to discuss the things you're doing well, the things you're not doing well, the roadblocks
Hmm.
you need help with. That's not leadership. That's like management, and no one wants that.
Mm. I love the phrasing of that. That's not leadership, that's management. Yeah. Where does everyone fall in, right? You ask yourself that hard question. I saw something that you put out about perks, right? I think leadership teams are maybe getting it wrong. They think what people need are perks. What's your stance on that? What do people actually need?
Yeah, so I think it's almost comical. It's almost laughable at this point.
Hmm.
If we think about it, if we put like our intellectual cap on and we want to just be like intellectual here for a second, we think because
Hmm.
we give people salary benefits and perks that they're expected to just come and be extremely committed, be extremely dedicated, consistently show up engaged, bring forward
Hmm.
new ideas, push the boundaries, innovate, and consistently be their best self at work. And
Yeah.
I think if we're looking at it in twofold, engagement and retention, let's focus on retention for a second. Like,
Hmm.
that is an offer they can get virtually anywhere. And I
Very
think
true.
post COVID, and we're way past the post COVID conversation, but I'd say
Hmm.
if there's something that really changed the landscape of the game in terms of how we work post COVID, it is that today there is more access than ever before. Remote work, although people are required to go back for many organizations, there are many organizations that don't require it. People will say quickly, cool, if that's all you're offering me, salary benefit perks, and I'm not getting anything else from this company,
Hmm.
I'd say you have a job, and there's no problem with that.
Hmm.
If you offer the same salary benefits and perks and you build this workplace where there's a high level of connection, the high level of belonging, the leadership team actually cares about the individual, not just the output.
Hmm.
At this point, then you have something that's very different than just another job. You have a
Yeah.
workplace that you truly don't want to leave. And it's very interesting when you talk to people who have been at jobs for several years because now people jump around all the time. The people who
Yeah.
stay at jobs, it's not because they're given a $10,000 bonus at the end of the year. Perhaps they know they could go make more money elsewhere. It's because of
Hmm.
whether or not they feel cared for by their leadership team and the people around them. And when they have
Hmm.
that, they stick around longer, they're more engaged, they're more committed, they're higher performing. And the job to them isn't just a job, it's a place where they have meaning, feel meaningful, and truly feel cared for. So I think that that's the differentiator that we want to focus on when we think about how do we build great teams.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about the different generations, and I know you've built multi-generational teams before. Do they respond the same way? If it's, a Gen Z or Boomer, millennials, to that, I guess the lens of care versus just perks?
Yeah, so I'm so happy you asked this question because I think, generally speaking, and there are generational experts. I'm not someone who's deeply studied how generations work, but I actually strongly believe that the conversation around the generational divide and the differences in generations is the wrong conversation. And I think
Mm,
the conversation that we need to be having at the leadership level or when we think about building teams is not about generation, but rather about individual. What does the individual want
mm,
and need? Because
yeah.
the truth is, we're all so different. And you can have two people in their 20s with the same exact goals, or you could have two people in their 20s and their 50s with similar goals, or you could have someone in their 50s and someone in their 20s with completely different goals. And, I think when we think about it, some organizations and some teams, they get hyper fixated on this generation or that generation or what does this generation want?
Hmm.
But it's really about understanding the individual. And I think when we think about teams, I always say is our goal should be to understand what the individual wants and needs so that we can tailor and personalize how we lead to best serve them. So, I just use this as an example, but and I'm sure you could look back in your own career, when you were in your early 20s, you probably had different dreams, ambitions, goals, things of that
Yeah.
nature. Fast forward, I'll use myself as the example. I know I did. Then when I was 31 or 30, or 31 now, I have a baby, I'm married, life looks very different.
Mhm.
I'm a little bit more comfortably situated in my career. So,
Yeah.
if you take this and you put someone like me in the workplace who just had a kid, returns to work,
Mhm.
maybe they're not as ambitious anymore. Maybe work's taking a little bit of a backseat and now they want a little more family time. They want a little more freedom, flexibility, support, autonomy. So,
Mhm.
these are things that we need to look at the individual level and not just the generational level. And specifically to answer your question though around perks and things of that nature, of course there are going to be some people where maybe they don't want this highly personalized, individualized approach to how they're led and things like that. Maybe they do just want more of a job. But I'd say
Mhm.
by far and large, the way the world is moving is people want to be people want to experience work as people, not as a resource to get a job done. And you will
Mhm.
always have people who may just want, I'm just here for the paycheck. And, but I think the organizations that are offering that or building that long term, I think they'll struggle to build really an incredible culture.
Yeah. I love your phrasing. And I've said that a couple times, but I think you're really intentional with the words. But you said people want to experience the workplace as people and not just as a resource.
Yeah,
That's great.
absolutely.
I love that. I will quote you and and say that again. Do you find that the employee base or the companies are skeptical when making this change? Or, and I'm also thinking just like culturally speaking, is there still this association between having care for the humans in your workplace, but that being seen as a weakness versus a strength? Like, are you actually seeing that play out? Or is that just kind of the old story?
I think where we miss the mark is we think care perhaps is a feeling we're trying to make people
Mm.
feel in the workplace, but I don't view care as this soft feeling or a value or a slogan we put in the handbook or we put a nice decal on the wall that says, we really care about our
Mm.
people here. I think all of that is missing the mark. And I think the way that I view care and the context in which I view care is that care is the strategy. It's a strategy that, when done well, transforms not just the teams we're building, but ultimately the lives of the people we serve. And
Mm.
I think the way that I think about it is that when organizations take care of what matters most, which isn't first their bottom line, it is 100% their people, they'll take care
Mhm.
of the rest. They'll take care of
Yeah.
business, they'll take care of the customers, they'll take care of the bottom line. And I've seen it and I've experienced it and I've heard stories time and time again of people who experience that who then come to work and make the company mission their own. They take more ownership
Mm.
and they run with it. And they they
Yeah.
they they do things that they wouldn't do if they just had if they were experiencing work as a regular job, let's call it. So of course there are still people who will probably listen to this and turn it off and say, this isn't how we do things here. I just had a call this morning actually with an organization that I'm doing some work with. And what was fascinating is that they actually acknowledge that if we worked with you maybe 5 years ago, the people in the room would have said, this is too soft for our team. But they said they've
Mhm.
come around and they're recognizing now that this is the way the world is moving and we need to adapt. We need to build a workplace where we're taking care of our people, and it's more important now than ever. So that's my own view on it. And I think generally speaking, there's a lot of talk around AI. Will AI replace us? Will it?
Mhm.
We're going to lose our jobs to AI, and I'm sure AI is going to revolutionize industries. How we work, it already is, right? Like so many people are.
Yeah.
I think people are spending more time in ChatGPT than they are on Google. So I know
Mhm.
it is revolutionizing, but I think actually the human element to how we work, to how we build, to how we lead, to how we manage, to how we sell, that's going to become the gold in which people pay attention, in which people
Yeah.
actually feel cared for and things of that nature.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, the things that you can offload to AI, those will just be automated, but the things that are left to humans, you need to make sure you're treating them like that, or else you'll lose them. They'll just go somewhere else. Uh,
Yeah. You
I
know,
think your message was really clear just about care not being a feeling. Like if you look at it as care is an action that you're performing, like you're saying it's the strategy, that makes a lot of sense. So thank you for clarifying that.
yeah, I just want to say one more thing that I just think is such a
Yeah.
fascinating thing, and it's got nothing to do with AI. I recently had an experience with Airbnb where I booked an Airbnb, and the listing was kind of misguided. It was advertised as a 3-bed. It was actually a 4-bed. I tried to cancel it. I couldn't
Mhm.
because it was like past the deadline. Whatever.
Okay.
So I called Airbnb and I'm like, hey, can you help me with this? They're like, no
Mhm.
problem. You get looped to their care team or their customer
Mhm.
support team is based in, I believe it's the Philippines. You get looped
Mhm.
there, and the people there, they must have like a strict protocol, and they're following some sheet line for line.
Yeah.
This is how we do things. This is the process. And I understand it. Like that's perhaps how you scale a company with that many inbound requests. I can only imagine how many inbound requests they're getting a day for their customer service team. And
Yeah.
it was so crazy. Like literally no one, they said we can help, but they really couldn't help. And there's no one you could
Let's
reach in
drift.
the US. So I posted it on LinkedIn after dealing with this for 10 plus hours, wasting more time than I would have liked. And finally, because like it caught on because I guess enough people had a terrible experience of
Mhm.
Airbnb and people were commenting. I got a random call from someone in the US from
Yeah.
Airbnb saying, I'm so sorry about your experience. I hope you'll consider staying with Airbnb again. Um, I'm going to issue you a full refund and I'm so sorry. And it was honestly one of the most interesting things because here I am, someone who studies workplace culture, teams, and
Yeah.
all through the context of how do we build great teams. And a lot of it is through the context of care. And I'm thinking,
Mhm.
here are people who have like strict protocol of what they're supposed to follow. But if they were given the freedom to think and to be a little bit
Yeah.
human, not just a robot following, like they would have had such a different experience because it would have actually listened to what I was saying and understood what I was experiencing and then said,
Yeah.
we can help you, but they couldn't. And it tainted my experience with Airbnb. And I loved this woman called me and I loved that she did that, but it's like
Mhm.
it was a little bit too late, I thought.
Yeah. Yeah. You've already experienced so much frustration and like trust had already been broken at that point that it's really hard to get that back.
Yes. And I
That's
say
it.
all that because I think just as we think about in the future with AI and work being transforming at a rapid pace, like I guess I don't fear the change because I
Yeah.
actually think the heart-centered human element of work is going to
Mhm.
be the gold in which we engage talent, retain talent, and build incredible
Mhm.
teams.
Yeah. That's the way that you're actually going to build something that lasts. Now, on the positive note or on the fun side, what do you do to make sure you're kind of beating burnout or just to de-stress and revitalize yourself?
Yeah. So I'd say I'll speak for myself, but I'll also share what I wish more leaders and teams did or do.
Mm. Yes.
Um, so I think it's incredibly important to one, take care of yourself. Like if you're not taking care of yourself,
Mhm.
making a space and time for things you got to do, things you got to do for yourself. For me, it's like a good workout, a good run, just like taking a beat from the day for like that 1 hour or 45 minutes. It's been harder because I have a 7-month-old now, but like,
Right. Yeah.
making, making that pocket of time has been so incredibly important. I think like for teams, the thing that I wish existed more was a natural curiosity to deeply understand our
Mhm.
people. And the reason why I want to circle back to that is because when we actually understand what's important to our people, we can
Mhm.
allow them the space and time to go and do those things and probably be more present. And,
Mhm.
it reminds me early on as I started doing this work, one leader told me he walks the floor every single day and it allows him to have a pulse on what's going on in his people's life. And he knows when
Mm.
someone on the team is running a marathon and he could leave them a handwritten note
Mm.
the day before with a pack of electrolytes and say, go get them this week.
Oh,
He knows when
that's
someone on the team,
huge.
yes. And, he knows when someone on the team has a loved one that's battling cancer and he can say, go home. The job will be
Yeah.
here when you come back. Take some time. But those those moments, those pockets don't exist unless we take the time to actually deeply connect with our people. And when we
Mhm.
do, in doing those things, I believe we actually help our people from burning out, from disengaging, and
Yeah.
from really ultimately burning out.
Yeah. Absolutely. When you feel connection, when you feel like people understand and like, not to overuse the word care, but when you feel like you actually do matter in the whole equation, that changes it completely. You don't feel like just a vessel that's being used. So I'm right there with you.
100%. Like, I wish as someone just who lives in New York, experienced the seasons, it's like sometimes you have a pocket of a beautiful day coming out of a winter. And like, it would be so, of course, all organizations have a million things to do. But like,
Mhm.
imagine if you just said to your team, hey, take the rest of the day. It's a beautiful day. Take the rest of the day. And no one's
Yeah.
expecting that every day, but it's like, take the day, do something nice for yourself. Or, I think even
Mhm.
December, it's a great time. And I post something about it every December. I wish more leadership teams sat down with their teams and said, hey,
Mhm.
we're going to take half a day. It's okay. The work can wait. I want to know
Yeah.
3 things that are important to you going into the next year outside of work, in work and outside of work. And I
Mhm.
guarantee if more teams did that, they'd be more connected. There would be less burnout, and people would be higher performing because it'd be like, cool, this is a little bit different. And by the way, in doing that
Yeah.
and having that conversation, the organization, the leadership team will learn things about their people, their team members, and say, we can propel you forward, not just in your role and in their life. And I think that that's really the secret to retaining great talent.
Well, that's powerful. I was just about to ask you for, a challenge or experiment that I can do and also all of the listeners. I mean, that sounds like a good one, even if it's not December. And you said ask what are 3 goals that they have, like outside of work?
Yes. And people will always say, "Oh, but people don't want to open up with me." And that's like first red flag. You probably don't have enough safety because people aren't willing to be their authentic self. But as the leader, take the initiative. Think about it before and say, "Hey, here are 3
Mhm.
things that are big that are important to me. I want you to hold me accountable. I want to share them with you.
Mm.
They're important to me and I want you to know. And I want you to
Yeah.
think about 3 things that are important to you. And if I can be supportive in those things, amazing. And by the way, you don't need to be supportive. For someone, their goal might be like cook through a cookbook. And then there's just the curiosity factor of checking in next quarter and
Yep.
say, hey, have you made it through the cookbook yet? Where are you at? What have you cooked? What's the best thing?
Yeah.
But it's those micro moments that make people feel like they're in a workplace where they actually feel cared for.
Yeah. And life's just more interesting, right? Like, we
For
need a little bit
sure.
more of that. I love that. Oh, so this is really exciting. I feel like I've a few things to implement in everyday work. So if someone wants to hear more about what you have or have you come speak to their company or at a conference, what's the best way they can reach you and follow you?
Yeah, cool. Check me out, DannyGoldbergSpeaks.com. I'm very active on LinkedIn as well. You can find me there. And if
Mhm.
you're doing something cool with your culture, with your team, I'd love to hear it. So shoot me a message, let me know. Yeah,
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Danny. You've given us a lot to mull over, and you are helping every company out there with every single time you talk about this. I think this is the key to success in reducing burnout. Thank you, Danny. And
I
thank you, all the
appreciate it.
listeners.